The Montana Constitution was adopted in 1972, and I was lucky enough to be here and vote for its ratification. It's been lauded worldwide for its provisions that protect the people, their privacy, and perhaps most importantly, their, quote, inalienable right to a clean and healthful environment, close quote, for present and future generations of Montanans. Those far-seeing provisions were the direct result of the enormous environmental damage done by the Copper Kings and the Anaconda Company that ran roughshod over the state with a level of corruption never experienced before, and that Montanans vowed would never be allowed in the future. The company owned judges, sheriffs, legislators, and the major newspapers to ensure there would be no problems as they ravaged the state while reaping enormous wealth. And they got away with it for 100 years, until Montanans finally said, enough is enough, and wrote and ratified the new Constitution. Why that matters now is a concern that Tim Sheehy, the Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate, is snared in a web of his own making. Having said he thinks all public land should be privatized, he finds himself in a desperate and failing backpedaling as public outrage grows. But words once spoken cannot be retracted, and Montanans take people at their word. For Montanans, the ability to access and enjoy our public lands, rivers, mountains, and the vast open horizons of the Great Plains is why we live here. That's why we are justifiably concerned with the increasing flood of wealthy in-migrants who bring with them a no-trespassing mentality as they seek to buy up and lock Montanans out of access to our public lands and waters. Montanans are as concerned now as those who drafted the 1972 Constitution, because they have seen and are seeing the consequences of private lands that have been ravaged by their owners and left the public to pick up the tab for whatever we can salvage. Almost all of Montana's many Superfund sites, including the Clark Fork Complex, which is the largest site in the nation, are on private property. The Superfund sites on public lands, those resulted from putting public lands in private hands. Then there are the private logging disasters left behind by Plum Creek Timber, a subsidiary of Burlington Northern Railroad, which owns the lands granted to the railroads as an incentive to settle the West. Plum Creek mercilessly clear-cut these once public lands when a decision came from its East Coast Board of Directors, who decided to liquidate the timber resources, and did just that, leaving stump fields, thousands of acres of knapweed, and a spider web of eroding logging roads where once old-growth forests stood. These environmental disasters are real, unlike Sheehy's endorsement of unproven theories that private landowners will take better care of Montanans' lands and waters, as espoused by the Bozeman-based Property and Environment Research Center, of which he was a board member. These are real-life examples over the last 100 years that simply cannot be denied or brushed aside. But don't just take my word for it. Watch and listen to Montanans describe in their own words their experiences, many multi-generational, with the state they love, and the sell-off Montana candidate they find completely out of touch with the state, its people, and the incredible legacy we have been handed to steward for future generations.
I'm a fourth generation Montanan. I live in Butte and I'm from Helena, Montana, where I grew up and enjoyed our expanse public lands.
I'm the director of the Alliance for the Wild Rockies. Our mission is to protect habitat for native species in the Northern Rockies. And it means a lot to me basically because of how I was raised. I grew up being one of 6 kids. The way my parents entertained us took us backpacking because it didn't cost any money.
What brought me here is what you see. It's the outdoors and the access that we have as individuals.
I graduated from high school in Livingston, Montana, and went off to college at Bozeman at Montana State University. Took ROTC, wound up a soldier in Vietnam. Came home and already recognized its changes Suddenly we're building huge power plants in eastern Montana, and there's discussion of making Montana the boiler room for America.
Our entire way of life is at stake. You know, growing up, you've always been able to just go and find a camping spot along a creek and enjoy outdoors, and now it's getting harder and harder to do that with the transfer and sales of public lands to private folks or wealthy corporations. One of my favorite trails, which was out by Remini, which is west of Helena, I've been going there for years and years, and I go a couple of years ago, drove all the way from Butte to go hiking that day, and it was blocked off and sold to a couple from Texas.
And then there's other people, like an organization called PERC that Tim Sheehy used to be a board member of, that wants to privatize all public lands. Well, Sheehy moved in and bought a large ranch near Bozeman, and it seems to be the new castles for rich people to show how rich they are.
Tim Sheehy owns a hobby ranch where he owns 40,000 acres, which blocks off about 500,000 acres of public land access. And even on that 40,000 acres that he owns, he still charges people $12,500 to go hunt elk. It's really easy for folks to buy, you know, little pieces of land here and there to block off the public access in the middle, and that's exactly what Tim Sheehy is doing with his land.
PERC doesn't believe in public land. I mean, that's the whole idea of it. Their dream would be to, let's sell her off. Well, then what happens to the people who live here? You don't get to go in any of the nice spots, that's for sure, when they start selling it off. And that's a big fear. And people have feared it since they set aside wilderness and national parks and so on.
Montana is a wonderful place because of our public lands. Closing off or selling public lands is very unpopular in Montana among the average voter. And so PERC and Sheehy are backing off that, or denying they were ever for privatizing public lands.
The law says that there is 10 feet on either side, give or take, that you can access to get down into the water. And as long as you stay below the high water line, you're on public water, you're on public land. Nobody can own the riverbed. Nobody can own the water. They can own the access to it.
I think in Montana, being tied to anti-access or anti-stream access is really bad politics for anyone. That, you know, the Supreme Court has already ruled on the Montana stream access law. But what we're seeing on the other end of things, and this is the public land side, is roads being gated. So, and here's where the money comes in, and here's where things have really changed. You have this pressure of these billionaires and big wealthy landowners coming in, looking for exclusive access.
People are coming here from all over, and people who move here may not share the same views as I do, as many do, about what access really means and what it should mean. We have to make sure that we understand what's at stake and where people stand on it, particularly going into an election like we're about to go into. Understanding who the candidates are and where they stand on public access is for me, that's a supremely important issue.
Tim Sheehy, who's running against Senator Tester, and he lied. He came here with the idea that PERC has. He bought land, a lot of land, he has a lot of money, and immediately started doing what everyone knows will make some money. I'm gonna make several $1,000s on each elk. Pretty soon I'll build me a real nice lodge and I'll make $10,000 or $15,000 off each elk. And you locals, well, if we get overwhelmed at some point, we'll let you shoot a cow or two. That's where it'll all wind up.
I felt like Tim Sheehy was very suspicious, like he knew what he was doing was wrong and was trying to hide it because he was omitting his involvement with PERC, and everyone who enjoys public land is involved in these issues knows that what PERC is. And they say that they're a conservation group, but their idea of conservation is just having more private land ownership everywhere. It is really shady to, especially when you're running for public office, to not be genuine and honest about who you are. That's who we are as Montanans, are genuine and honest people, and he is not one of us.
I think Republicans of past decades were, they liked open space, they liked wilderness, they liked natural areas, but they don't now. I think they might just go ahead and think, well, yeah, we got to get this stuff privatized because it's wasted land the way it is, because they have a very narrow view these days.
I can't imagine anyone who loves the outdoors in Montana can't see that it's going away and that they would support Tim Sheehy, who would then follow the lead of the rest of the Republican Party. They bring up a guy that nobody's ever heard of who just happens to be rich, who has backed up from everything he believed in before they picked him. So they picked him because he had a lot of money and he could be the American warrior and go off and take out John Tester and somehow deliver something better to we Montanans. I don't know how he could. He has no experience in any issue facing us, public education or farming for that, or ranching. And so he doesn't know anything about any of that stuff. But he's going to come and take our Montana values and represented us. That's hogwash. He's going to go represent, once again, money and moneyed interests and how to make money and power, and they go together.
My plea to voters this election is to, really look at the candidates and people who are running and, stop nationalizing our state. Really look into what these candidates are supporting and opposing, because if we are really, really close to losing our public lands.
We're certainly talking about the soul of Montana here, that anyone would ever think that our public lands should go up for sale, because that's what makes a Montanan a Montanan. Not very much of the country can just get in their car and drive out 10 miles and be where we get to be, so we're getting priced out of it. My message to my fellow Montanans is wake up. Can't you see that all these rich people come into our state, the carpetbaggers, and have taken over all of our offices except John Tester's at all levels. They run the legislature 2-to-1. They run all the statewide offices, and the things we love about Montana are going to hell. Now, are you going to reward them by electing them again, or run them out of office? Well, I'm afraid that most of them, because the ones that are going to go be voting, they got some affection for Donald Trump that will cause them to go right down the ballot and vote Republican. So if you like Donald Trump, vote for him, but heaven's sakes, think about Montana.